Believe it or not, but humans are not extinct. But there are times where humanity almost ended, and we're going to be watching them.
From supervolcanoes to mysterious event X's and Norway almost murdering everyone on Earth. These are the times humanity almost went extinct.
I mean, I can imagine volcanoes being the reason, or whatever the mysterious X thing. Norway causing extinction. Didn't see that one coming.
Toba supervolcano.
Toba super. Okay.
It'd be tough to find a mate in today's high-stress world, but it was never tougher than after the Toba supervolcano event, where there might have been as many as 1,000 reproductive adults left on the entire face of the Earth.
Okay.
72,000 years ago, modern humanity had hit its stride. Our brains were now basically the same form they'd be in when inventing the space shuttle and Fortnite, arguably a step backwards.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's
We'd long
progress.
ago
Really.
left the savannas of Africa and started to spread around the world. We were using spears to hunt with, and stone tools were today's iPhone. And it wouldn't be long until we invented the wheel, space travel, and the Star Trek Galactic Federation. But one supervolcano in Indonesia had different plans for humanity.
Okay, so let's get this straight. Okay, there's a super volcano. All right, we still live on the same planet. It's in Indonesia, and it could have ended humanity. Okay, I am a bit worried to see what happens with this. Obviously, I'm very worried to see what happens with this, but we will see what happens.
Sometime around 70,000 BC, the Toba supervolcano blew its top, resulting in one of the largest single-event volcanic eruptions humanity is aware of.
I guess with volcanoes, you know, I should probably just listen because I'm no expert, but I guess with volcanoes, they can kind of blow up, but it's not just the lava and the magma, like it's the ash cloud that they release and stuff. I remember the Iceland volcano a few years ago and that like affected loads of things, so maybe that affects it. Let's have a look.
Until Yellowstone blows its top sometime next week after you watch this video.
I hope
The
not.
eruption blew an astonishing 1,700 cubic miles of vaporized rock into the
Wow,
atmosphere.
that's quite a lot,
or
isn't
the
it?
equivalent of 3 million Empire State Buildings. This
Yeah, that is
resulted
a
in a
lot.
layer of ash half a foot thick, falling all over the South Pacific area. Within days, the ash had suffocated all plant life and poisoned all the water, dooming every human in the region. Being further away from the eruption, however, was no guarantee of survival, as the supervolcano eruption had global consequences. The explosion pumped tons of gas and debris into the atmosphere, so much that it actually blocked sunlight. This led to a global cooling effect on the average.
Oh, this is interesting. Wonder this is how the ice ages happen, because yeah, you'd think, okay, well, if it's kind of toxic and polluting things in the area, yeah, you're in trouble, but the other side of the Earth getting affected by a volcano, that is one heck of
of 3
an
to
eruption.
5 degrees Celsius, between 5.4 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit. Though
it's
in
chilling.
some places the temperature fell as much as 18 degrees for several years. This would be devastating for a lot of plant life.
It's the Ice
and may
Age.
have even triggered an ice age.
Well, I
Even
said that. Hey,
survivors well
they should get me working on this documentary team. I know what might have happened. I could be a historian or whatever
outside the
they
blast
call
zone
them.
would have still contended with the highly acidic rain and snow, which would poison water supplies. The sudden temperature swings would have completely upset migratory behavior of large animals, who would begin starving off after failure of local plant life. While it's likely very few humans died directly from the massive explosion, the aftermath nearly doomed.
Okay. I'm now interested to see, well, why didn't human? If it affected the whole Earth, well, why have we still got humans? Go on, tell me. Come on,
Humanity to extinction.
Tell me, how did it happen?
One study estimates there were just about 1,000 adult humans capable of breeding left, while another drops that number down to just 40. What's
Okay,
clear
so there wasn't 1,000 before it, but yeah, well, I guess that makes sense. But they reckon it got down to 1,000, maybe even as low as 40. Okay, interesting.
from the genetic record is that right around the Toba catastrophe, humanity experienced a genetic bottleneck, which brought us incredibly close to total extinction. Toba is believed to be the reason why so many different species of humans also went extinct, and why today there's only one surviving intelligent great ape, other than Bigfoot, of course. Toba's absolute decimation of the
It's an interesting theory. I mean, I guess they can't say for sure on these things, can they? You know, they just kind of if it erupted 72,000 years ago, they don't know for sure. And like, I'm not saying this is all definitely true. You know, this is just what people kind of think happened. Nobody was there, and you know, but I don't know how they estimate these things. But it's interesting how, you know, humans almost did die from something like that. But whether I believe this one, I don't know. It seems like they might have got some things right, but everything, you just never know with things like this, dear. But anyway,
The
let's
human
see.
gene pool could have potentially set humanity back tens of thousands of years in development. If it wasn't for Toba, you could have been enjoying Star Trek Federation level technology right now, instead of slaving away like a modern peasant.
Yeah, why are we still on
The
paper then?
explosion also helped wipe out other types of humans and led to a world where only a single intelligent great ape would survive. If it weren't for Toba, there's a chance today's society would have multiple intelligent types of humans, which would have been neat, but probably just made us murder the absolute hell out of each other, so, you know, silver lining. Event X, 1.2 million years ago.
Event X, okay.
Modern humans evolved a few 100,000 years ago, but humanity almost didn't get a chance to get that far down the evolutionary process. In 2009, scientists used DNA to read back on human history and help fill in some holes in the history books. In all DNA, there are some sequences known as mobile genetic elements, or small bits of DNA that move around and multiply within the genome.
Guys, get your scientific hats on, okay? We're going biology here, all right? DNA and all of that.
Using a slide rule and a microscope, spoiler alert, nobody on the infographic staff knows how genetic research works. Scientists are able to use these bits of DNA to help piece together our genetic past. What they found was shocking. About 1.2 million years ago, something was seriously wrong with the Homo genus. Amongst various members of the Homo genus, including Homo ergaster and Homo erectus, there was only a population of about 26,000. Not in one area, but on the entire face of the Earth.
Wait. So let's get this straight. From reading the DNA, they can see how much of a population is on the Earth. No, that can't be. There must be a different reason of the population. But let's see what I have to say, because there's no way you can get the population of humans on the Earth from the DNA. No, there's no. I don't think that's possible.
Incredibly, that's about half the total capacity of Rome's Colosseum, and about how many total gorillas are left in the wild today.
That's sad. You know what? That is sad. Just a little side fact, but there's only 26,000 gorillas left in the wild. That is a shame that, you know, they're dying out. They're endangered, so endangered.
How could several highly successful species have such a low population number? Archaeological evidence proves that our ancestors were living all across Africa and Eurasia, and they'd already begun using stone tools. There are two theories. The first is that some mysterious Event X nearly wiped out humanity from the face of the Earth, leaving the surviving species of man with only a few thousand members each. However, no definitive event can be linked back to this cause in the archaeological or geological record, and there's no link between other species and a subsequent mass dying. What then could have targeted the Homo genus?
So nobody knows. Nobody knows what this event is. Yeah, I'm skeptical on this one. If I'm listening to this correctly, they're saying that they used the DNA to track back the population of the Earth, and they're like, this is unusually low, 1.2 million years ago, and that means that there must have been some event. But man, yeah, okay. I'm skeptical on this one, but we'll carry on.
Genus, and nearly driven us to extinction, almost like an orchestrated culling. A second theory is that these population numbers actually represent a sort of steady state for the early Homo species. This population size isn't an anomaly, but rather the average population for the time. This conflicts somewhat with the widespread evidence we have for the spread of all the Homo species and the risk of sudden extinction from such catastrophically low numbers for species spread out over such a vast area. However, given that humans actually have literally zero natural weapons except our brains, we can sort of get behind the idea that early Homo species sucked so bad at fighting off animals that we struggled to survive, meaning humanity basically...
Were we lower on the food chain? Is that what you're saying? The lions and tigers, they would eat us. I mean, yeah, the dinosaurs would be long gone by then, but there would still be a lot of predatorial things, wouldn't they? You know, like we've got today and stuff. So, yeah, who knows? Who knows what was going on back then? No one was around, so it's so difficult to know what happened a million years ago, isn't it? Because I don't know. I mean, they do amazing based on the limited information we have now, but to even come close to it, it's great. I do find it interesting to see what the research says and stuff, but at the same time, you know, in 20 years' time, scientists could be saying a different thing, you know what I mean? Like, it's always changing based on more evidence coming to light and stuff.
Just barely eked by. Mother Nature had a chance to kill us off in Mr. Shot, and now we're making her pay for it. Next time someone asks you to recycle, remind them that this is our shot, and unlike Mother Nature, we're not hesitating. Our personal opinion is that there was indeed some mysterious Event X that targeted the Homo genus and only the Homo genus. Consider the following. Why are all humans universally repulsed, disgusted, or terrified by multi-legged, creepy-crawling insects?
Well, I tell you what it was. Here's my theory. Their theory is spiders or something, alright? You know what my theory for Event X is, if it did happen? Aliens. Aliens came and they attacked us and we won. No, that doesn't make sense, does it? But Maybe giant spiders. That would be... Imagine if there used to be giant spiders. I don't think the fossil record supports
And also share a common fear of the dark. Lastly, why are UFO phenomenon reported literally all around the world?
Oh wait,
throughout
they're going to
human
say
history?
aliens as well.
Did spider-like space aliens with multiple appendages raid human settlements at night and try to cull us, but mysteriously stopped just short of complete extinction?
That would
We're not saying this did.
That would freak me out. Can you imagine if a giant spider alien kept... Oof. But you know what? Is there aliens? Is there life out there, guys? Who knows? Who knows? Again, one of the... So many unanswered questions, isn't there? We're just so insignificant. You know, this is a very deep philosophical video, but we're so insignificant in the world, aren't we?
But we are saying that science can't prove it didn't happen. The Black Death.
Science can't prove it didn't happen. Can't prove it did. You can, yeah, okay. And anyway, the Black Death. Let's see what this is.
For over a decade, the bubonic plague had been ravaging Asia, but since Europe was writing most of the history books at the time, it didn't hit prime time until October of 1347. 12 ships had docked at the Sicilian port of Messina and brought the world early Christmas presents, possibly within
Is this where the rats
Asia.
brought in the Black
The
Plague?
Death. Authorities
Death.
would rush these ships out of the harbor, but it was too late. The cat was already out of the bag.
There it
or,
is.
more accurately, the flea-infested rats. This horrendous disease caused massive boils in the groin and under the armpits, which could grow as big as an apple, according to witnesses.
Oh, that
The
sounds,
massive boils could continuously
very
leak
painful.
blood and pus, while the victim suffered from chills, fever, vomiting, diarrhea, and aches and pains. Eventually, the victim would die, but likely not before spreading the disease to dozens of other people, since humanity did not understand how plagues worked very well.
That's interesting. Because, so let's say you were ill, okay? Because now we know, if you're ill, if you're coughing, if you've got boils all over your skin, you know, somebody's not going to go near you because they're like, if I go near them, I'm going to catch it because of how germs work. And that's just so obvious to us, it's like second nature. But people back then had no idea how diseases spread. So people wouldn't quarantine, people wouldn't keep away. They would just go over to someone, yeah, and then it would just spread. That's interesting. That's really interesting that that's how people used to behave.
There was no treatment for the plague, or rather there was, but basically it didn't do anything except make things worse and outright kill people. Common treatments included leeching or bleeding, the making of small incisions in order to drain out the bad blood. Since 1000...
I went back to meaning, but yeah, that's that's not, yeah, old medicine. I'm so glad we live in the time now where we have modern medicine, not where people are like, oh, we'll suck out the bad blood. Yeah, that's not how it works.
Nobody knew anything about germs. Often these small incisions would hasten death by becoming infected
it just made it
themselves,
worse by...
or the plague could spread from one
sense.
victim to another thanks to the repeat...
Wait, so this guy's a doctor on the right. He's got people coming in. Is he not worried that he's going to catch... Well, no, because he doesn't get how it works, but surely the doctors would be dying off as well because they're spending time with the infected.
The use of a bleeding tool without proper sanitation. Other treatments which...
Oh, so it would spread because they wouldn't clean the knife. Oh, man. Well, I don't know if it was a knife, but you know what I mean. Yeah, not the smartest thing either.
perhaps wouldn't kill you but were completely useless included laying in bathwater with fresh flowers and various oils, proving that even in plague-infested Middle Ages Europe, Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop brand could have found a way to turn a profit by selling use.
Could have worked. You know what though? That one's not too bad. You know, if you've got really itchy skin, have a bath. Like we still would use that today, wouldn't we? Obviously, it wouldn't cure you, but generally it does help soothe it. So you know, I can get behind that they had some good ideas.
Things got so bad that most people began to suspect that the plague was a punishment from God. This prompted the short-lived flagellant movement, which included mass groups of men who would travel from town to town, whipping themselves as an act of penance for the world's sins. The men would beat themselves with heavy leather straps that were embedded with sharp pieces of metal and repeat the process 3 times a day for 33 and a half days.
Did they really? Which idiot came up with that idea? You know what? We're going to whip ourselves every day, 3 times a day for 30 days, and maybe God will forgive us. Yeah, I don't think that is how God works in that situation.
Then they pack their bags and move on to the next town.
Oh, and they do it
hoping
in
to atone
every
for
town.
Humanity through their suffering. The
That does
movement
sound-
was eventually ended by the Pope, not because he cared about the men whipping themselves for men's sins, but because flagellants who were willing to suffer for the people had become a lot more popular than that rich, corrupt papacy. Estimates on its death toll vary from 75 million to 200 million,
Wow, that's
which would
crazy
have been
amounts of
over
deaths.
half the human population, rapidly losing half of your population.
That's a lot, like 50% of the population, and it could have easily been worse. You know what I mean? And it would have left a serious toll on the rest of the people, you know, economically and all this stuff. So that's a crazy
It is a slippery
thing.
slope to extinction. But luckily, humanity's gradual adopting of sanitary practices and technology dramatically reduced the effects of the plague.
Ah, so they learnt to wash their hands and get cleaner, and that's what stop the plague. So the thing is, I was about to say, so we wouldn't really have to we wouldn't suffer from a plague nowadays because we are much cleaner as a people. But we've just lived through a pandemic, so you can't take anything for granted, can you? You know, yeah. I mean, obviously ours wasn't as deadly as that plague, which killed like, you know, estimated up to 200 million. You know, obviously coronavirus hasn't killed that many people, but you know, it just shows things can still spread like crazy, and yeah, it's interesting.
While it never really went away, you can still get it today. The plague never resurfaced as furiously as it did in the 14th century.
I guess you can get the plague, but
what
it's
really
not as dangerous.
limited its effectiveness and
at least we have probably a
humanity's
better
bacon, though,
medicine
is the fact that at the time the plague wasn't very good about getting around. Long-distance travel was limited to ship, and many human populations at the time were extremely isolated.
Where is that? wait, what country? Am I stupid or wait? Hold on.
Relation to each other. Only merchants sold.
Wait, what country is that? Hold on, give me a minute to think. I've had to think about it, and my guess is that that's North America and South America, like by the shapes of it. But it's just a really weird angle for it, isn't it?
Were extremely
but yeah, that makes sense. Like obviously in like Europe, the mainland, but obviously you know you have to travel quite a bit to get to America over boat, so it probably it wouldn't spread over there like it did throughout.
In relation to each other. Only merchants, soldiers, and political figures undertook regular journeys, severely limiting transmission vectors and routes for the plague. Were a new disease as virulent and deadly as the plague to strike today, we only have to look to COVID to know that within months, most of humanity would have been wiped out. Nuclear
yeah. I guess COVID was nowhere near as deadly as the Black Death, or the plague, or whatever you want to call it, but because we're so much more connected now as people, we go everywhere, we travel so much, it would spread crazily. Maybe it could have a much more serious effect than the pandemic did, which is crazy to think about because it obviously affects us all a lot.
Holocaust 1995.
The nuclear
Norwegians
holocaust
are a hardy and, on the whole, generous and kind people. That's why it's a shame they almost murdered every person on the earth. In 1995, the Cold War had officially been over for 4 years. The West had won the showdown between capitalism and communism, and the frost-thawed relations were slowly warming between Russia and the US. For 40 years, the specter of nuclear war had hung over the world, with psychological effects so profound that some psychiatrists believe it had measurable effects on the evolution of the modern world. But that was all over now. Then, on January 25th,
okay, yeah, so interesting. The Cold War happened. Yeah, I mean, that was where there was a big nuclear threat. Obviously, a lot of you guys weren't born probably there. I wasn't born then either. But yeah, there was a big thing of a nuclear threat. To be honest, we got the Ukraine-Russia thing, and there could be another nuclear threat. I'm not saying it could definitely happen, but they've got the weapons to do it, which is worrying to think about. But yeah, but now that's over, but now apparently something happens later on. Let's see what happens next. I don't even know what this one is.
1995, the end nearly came for humanity. Just a few hours before dawn, a rocket lifted off from the Andøya rocket range off the northwest coast of Norway. This sounding rocket contained scientific experiments as part of a study of the aurora borealis by a joint Norwegian and American team, and Norway had alerted the Russians to the launch well in advance. However, those notifications never made it up the proper channels, and with
so this is an experiment, and then they'd alerted Russia that this was going to happen, they were going to launch this, and then Russia never got the information, so they thought it was an attack.
In seconds of the rocket lifting off, Russian long-range radar had already detected it. For Russian radar operators, it was the sum of all fears. The rocket behaved exactly like a U.S. submarine-launched Trident nuclear missile and incredibly took the exact same trajectory already predicted to be taken in a first U.S. strike against Russia. In the event of a nuclear war, it was expected that the first launch would come from a U.S. submarine and intended to detonate high in the atmosphere and take out Russian early warning radar and communications with an EMP blast. Minutes later, American Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missiles would rain down hellfire across Russia, and Russia could do nothing to defend itself. The Russian civilization would be wiped off the map within 15 minutes.
That's interesting to see that Russia knew how they could be wiped out. And they thought the Norwegians were going to do it. They nearly went wrong from Norway. I thought Norway did it on purpose, but no, this is an accident. Okay, it's interesting.
And only a handful of Russian nukes would ever get off the ground in retaliation. Due to the low resolution of Russian radars, they were unable to determine the size of the rocket's stages, which would have helped identify the rocket as a real Trident missile or not. Russian radar could only track the speed and trajectory, and as the Norwegian-sounding rocket entered the flight corridor used by American Minuteman missiles, Russian computers made a match with a Trident missile. To add to the terrible coincidences, the sounding rocket even released a nose cone at an extremely similar altitude and speed to a Trident missile.
And did they do any of this on purpose? This is all like sounding very fishy, you know. Yeah, we're gonna build something that looks exactly like a Trident missile that will nuke Russia, but it's not. It's just an experiment, you know. It's an idiot design, that one.
Within minutes of the launch, the Russian nuclear football was placed in front of Russia's then President Boris Yeltsin. He had a fateful decision to make, and every second he hesitated, Russia's ability to retaliate diminished. As soon as the American Trident missile's nuclear payload exploded, Russian early warning radar would be knocked out. Secondary attacks would wipe out Russian nuclear ballistic missile fields a few minutes after that. Concurrent with strikes on Russia's ballistic missiles would be strikes on major communication nodes and Moscow itself. Then would come the Air Force bases housing Russia's airborne nuclear strike force. Yeltsin's ability to communicate with his nuclear forces, however, would have been eliminated well before that. If Russia were to retaliate, it was now or never.
That's some pressure, isn't it? Thinking, we're going to get blown off the face of the earth. This is what they think is going to happen. We are going to all be blown off the face of the earth unless we fight back and launch a nuclear attack. But there was no nuclear attack happening on Russia. But they thought it was. This is interesting. What did he do?
A heated discussion erupted. Yeltsin needed more information, but Russian radar, lagging a little bit behind American radar, simply couldn't give it. The military was adamant. Russia had to respond while it still could.
So the militaries were fighting back. What does the
But Yeltsin couldn't, for the life of him, figure out why the U.S. would strike unexpectedly. He made his decision. Russia would not retaliate. For the next few minutes, every senior official aware of the early morning crisis held their breath and waited for new reports to come in.
Wow, what a decision. Russia would not retaliate. That could have been a massive world war that could have, wiped out humans. A nuclear war would, destroy the earth. And he made the decision not to retaliate because he felt that America was not going to be like that. Which, why would America randomly attack, American... In history, I don't think they've ever tried to start a world war for no reason, have they? But this is, obviously Russia and America didn't like each other, but anyway.
Or to not come in. If the attack was real, they would never hear of it because the EMP blast would knock out communications with any unit within visual range of the actual detonation. The only way that they would know that the end of the world had indeed begun was when satellite confirmation of nuclear launches in the US reached them, if the EMP blast didn't knock out those receiving stations as well. It could very well be that Yeltsin and his staff would never even know the nuclear war had begun. Blinded and cut off from all communications by a massive EMP blast, the only warning they would have is the sudden dawning of an artificial sun directly over the Kremlin, followed by almost immediate, complete atomization. No EMP blast ever came, and working backwards, Russian computers calculated the launch site as a Norwegian rocket base, the last place US forces would fire a nuclear weapon from. Thankfully, due to the end of the Cold War, the US and Russia had been on much friendlier terms than normal. But had the incident occurred just 4
really
years earlier,
story.
it's extremely likely the world would have ended in atomic hell.
Yeah, let's say that. Well, actually got a scratch in his head now. But yeah, I guess if Russia and America had been against each other in that Cold War time, and then this had happened, Russia would have been like, well, this is an attack, we're attacking back. But because they were on better terms, that had ended, it didn't. It's amazing skin in the teeth stuff, isn't it?
Now go check out worst.
Very, very interesting stuff. And if you enjoyed this video and got all the way to the end, please subscribe. I'll be reacting to loads more stuff. Thank you for watching.